Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I'm not buying no Nvidia cards anymore. Now, I don't want you to take this as like clickbait or some overly negative video. I really am just not going to purchase more Nvidia stuff, mostly because of A, their paper launches, and also because I'm trying to make changes to my system, and I have found greener pastures when it comes to Team Red or AMD. So, okay, why are we starting off with this? And let me just kick off with some positivity, okay? Now, I've been a purchaser of Nvidia stuff for a few years now, and the reason why I buy Nvidia graphics cards is no matter how people want to slice it, they ultimately are better than their competition. It used to be buying a graphics card back in the day really meant which one gave the best raw performance. But it's not that simple anymore. GPUs nowadays are very much carried by the software that is written by their actual teams, more so than even the hardware. Nvidia stuff is amazing genuinely because of some of the upscalers they have. And now, while I'm a bit questionable on things like frame generation and the latency it can add, there is some cool stuff that they have, like Reflex 2 that's coming out. DLSS itself is probably one of the best premier technologies of upscaling. Seriously, playing a game like Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty with path tracing and all the bells and whistles enabled, it is genuinely impressive how Nvidia is able to take a relatively low resolution image and upscale it to the point where it actually can match up relatively close to what is a native render. Now, path tracing is such a computationally expensive form of rendering, but in this case, for Cyberpunk, it was actually worth it. The game developers built their game, and with the assistance of Nvidia, made Night City look absolutely, no pun intended, night and day different from the consoles and, a non-ray trace scenario. So generally speaking, this was worth the cost to the performance hit. And at the end of all of it, using all of Nvidia's upscaling and frame generating, it led to a playable and enjoyable experience. I can't say that's the same for everything. I don't usually use ray tracing on every game. I think ray tracing is kind of one of those things where it can either be amazing or it can be kind of a gimmick, depending on how the game developer implements it. For instance, playing something like Hitman, World of Assassination, a game, that I very much love. It's an action-oriented game, and instead of generating frames or tracing rays, I prefer to just render the game without that technology because I think it looks really good without ray tracing already, and I don't want to have the extra latency of generating rays and generating frames, and I like to have 120 frames locked on my monitor when I'm playing a game that's so action-oriented. So again, it really does depend on the kind of game and how the developer implements it. Not every single ray tracing solution is great. That also being said, Nvidia is doing some really cool shit with assisting the remastering of old games. For instance, if you're in the market to play things like Half-Life 2, there is a serious massive remake coming out entirely, from my understanding, for free. All because Nvidia made something known as RTX Remix. So developers can load up old games and for free remaster it themselves. And they look jaw-droppingly great. For instance, if you like Need for Speed Underground 2, guys, they have path traced Need for Speed Underground 2 now, and it looks absolutely fucking amazing. Save for a couple of issues, it is exactly how I remember playing Underground 2 as a kid. It looks jaw-droppingly amazing, and all of this is available for fucking free. And in some cases, you don't even entirely need the Nvidia card to do so. But let's get back to reality over here. Now, recently, Nvidia launched the 50 series of cards, and if you look into the actual sales of it, right, this was a leaked spreadsheet of how many units were distributed in the United States alone. So in some cases, places like Dallas, Texas, ended up getting 9 5090s. They ended up getting 89 5080s. So yeah, this is what we like to call a paper launch, all right? Basically, they revealed this. They distributed a few of these cards to the stores. I would imagine there's a lot more fucking gamers in Dallas, Texas than 89. They definitely could have made a fair amount of sales that weren't just, this pitiful launch right here. Now, obviously, these very few cards that were distributed, all of them were obviously sold out. I made a video around launch day when it came to my buying experience in Canada. And if this amount looks low for the United States, remember, Canada's probably going to be like a fifth of this. We probably maybe got like one RTX 5090 in the whole province of Ontario at this point. And for anybody that's wondering, will these cards come back anytime soon? According to a lot of the retailers, it apparently could take months before a restock actually shows up. So if you didn't get one right now, you might actually be waiting weeks, if not months, to get your chance at purchasing it again. And if a bot jumps in, tough fucking shit. Now, there have been some retailers that have actually decided to take matters into their own hands and sell directly to their consumers. I swear to God, the first time I saw this, it blew my mind. So Zotac USA, I bought a few GPUs from them before. They ended up going onto their community Discord and going, yeah, as you know, the 50 series drop, and what happened was it was all dominated by scalpers and bots. Today and for the next few weeks, we're launching priority access for the most loyal members. So if you were in their Discord, right, you basically get the chance to win a lottery to buy a GPU from them. That's how bad buying a graphics card has gotten, okay? There are so many scalpers, so many bots, so many ones and zeros, beep, beep, boop, boop, buying a GPU that if you're a fucking gamer, good luck. I would say if you're somebody that wants to game, it's probably better for you to buy a older series GPU, enjoy that for now, because buying anything brand new in the market right now is a test of your actual patience and sanity. And that's not even before the actual GPU gets even more expensive, okay? Obviously with things like tariffs now becoming a mainstream part of the world. So if you didn't get a GPU before, before like tariffs were into place, well, now you have to pay 10% more just for the, again, tariffs to also account into the purchasing decision. So realistically, Nvidia has kind of made it almost impossible to really purchase any of their new cards, even if I was really in the market to buy them. But recently, as you all know, most of my content, not really recently, for a few years, I've been effectively a Linux user. And from my experience, using Linux has basically made it that so where Nvidia is kind of like the annoying fucking child to work with. You know, for a while, Nvidia cards on Linux typically involved downloading proprietary drivers, and very recently, Nvidia made open source drivers. However, they still lag behind AMD, especially for Linux users. So for instance, a game like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, right? A game that I've really been trying to play. I enjoy this game. Playing this underneath Linux with an Nvidia GPU means that the terrain doesn't render. And that is something to do with the actual GPU driver. So whether Nvidia jumps in or somebody in the community comes in with a modified driver, we're not basically playing this game underneath fucking Linux. Now in the Muda box, which I have running with a 6900 XT AMD card, that runs the entire game better than my PlayStation ever could. It's a beautiful experience. And it's because underneath Linux, AMD is just a far more supported platform. Obviously, AMD cares more about it, and with the work of Valve and several other people in the Mesa driver, it's just a better experience for Linux users. Which means that, honestly, the next rig that I'm going with, the next actual build, is probably going to involve an AMD card. Now you might be going, but Muda, AMD stuff isn't as good. And the reality of it is you're right. AMD stuff really isn't as good as Nvidia. They're usually playing catch up in a lot of fields. Things like ray tracing, things like DLSS. A lot of these things AMD does lack behind because their actual hardware does not have the actual, capabilities to support some of these upscaling technologies like DLSS in the same manner. DLSS is as good as it is because Nvidia puts a lot of effort into the hardware just to make it so that their software works well with the hardware acceleration, and they produce really good upscalers. Like, there's no joke about it. Nvidia's newest DLSS is genuinely a game changer. Alright, so this is a image comparison, very quick and dirty, of Cyberpunk 2077 using AMD's FSR and, of course, Nvidia's DLSS. Now, reminder, this is not the most updated models for each and every single respective technology. Obviously, AMD's FSR implementation is, I believe, just 3, not even the more updated versions. But if you're looking just here based on a game that you can play right now without modifying it, obviously, this is what AMD's FSR upscaling looks like with the performance preset, running at a resolution of 5120 by 1440. So yes, it's blurrier, the foliage is not resolved in the best possible way, and again, this is an image captured by me standing as still as possible, which is probably the best case scenario for both of these images. Now obviously, if I slide this image tool to the right, you'll notice that things look a little bit sharper on the DLSS new transformer model. But instead of looking at this patch of grass, look at this tree real carefully. Under FSR, things like the actual branches and the leaves don't resolve as finely as the DLSS model. So this is where obviously Nvidia's technology reigns a bit supreme, but that's because there's a lot of hardware assisting this. Obviously AMD software is purely actual software for now. And that's where, again, their technology is pretty much platform agnostic. That said, obviously with AMD FSR 4, I do expect them to be challenging, but this is where people talk about with AMD's technology playing catch-up in a lot of ways with NVIDIA's DLSS and their ray tracing and a lot of these systems that NVIDIA has kind of capitalized and genuinely made serious advancements on. But that's not to say AMD should be far behind forever. I think what they've done is a pretty solid effort in competing with a pure hardware system that they're going up against. But yeah, obviously if DLSS and a lot of these techs are important to you, you may consider totally going to NVIDIA's side. Even things like these reflections in the ground you're noticing do resolve. This is, for instance, AMD, and of course it looks just generally cleaner on NVIDIA's side. And if these features are important to you, which obviously at the price point you are, yeah, to anybody it's very important, then obviously NVIDIA is still the choice. Like, it's made it to the point where playing a game like Cyberpunk, I'm actually able to get 20 extra frames on average on my system because I can use a performance tier DLSS that runs the game at an even lower resolution, but still has it looking very, very sharp indeed. Now, it's not something that I can do with things like AMD's FSR. Seriously, if you went into Cyberpunk and you ran NVIDIA's newest model against, AMD's most newest model, not apples to apples comparisons here because there are significant differences in the versions involved, there is still a noticeable quality difference between AMD solutions, which are purely software for now, versus NVIDIA solutions, which are, again, hardware assisted. There's a reason why NVIDIA stuff is so locked down, and it's not because they're just a bunch of assholes. They are assholes, but they have somewhat of a reason to lock this stuff down, and I don't want to jump into the misinformation pit that I feel exists a lot in the PC space when talking about this specific, technology. Now, for a game like Monster Hunter Wilds that recently just ended up getting into a demo, here's a clip from Daniel Owen's video, and I've played this a little bit myself too. He ran the benchmarking tool, which showed that on average, this game at 1080p with a 3060 RTX card, 5600 X6 core processor, this game was running like absolute turd sandwiches. And the reality is too, I think a lot of modern gaming, and I ran this benchmark, the moment that you fire up a game and it tells you want to enable shit like frame generation, you're already entering a spooky sign right there. A lot of modern gaming, a lot of these modern games that release, especially from at least Capcom's RE engine games, are not good experiences, okay? They really are not good experiences. Generally speaking, if you play something like Resident Evil 4 Remake, shit runs pretty well. When you play something like Monster Hunter or Dragon's Dogma, anything with a slight open world, the game suddenly runs like dog cheeks. And it really always isn't even the graphics card. A lot of it is based on the CPU. Like, there's a lot of heavy hammering going on in the processing. But this game has been such a weirdly blurry mess that on one of my favorite Reddit boards, r/fucktaa, people have been complaining about how Monster Hunter Wilds appears to look very smeary and very ghosty. See, there's a problem with some of these technologies like DLSS or FSR or upscalers in general or frame generators, is that at the end of it, the games will look genuinely blurrier, okay? I was playing through Deus Ex, a couple nights ago. Beautiful game. Absolutely love it. And obviously, this is a game that's, I want to say, released 2000, 1999, something of that nature. And yes, it's a game that is 25 years off from Monster Hunter. But, looking at a game running natively on your system, no upscaling, the level of sharpness is unmatched to a modern AAA game or a quadruple A game if you're buying from Ubisoft at this point, where upscalers and frame generators are almost a necessity. It feels like the games do not look that genuinely amazing for the amount of blurriness that you have to, compensate for. Now, I'm going to just get off this point here because I really think it does detract from the overall, message here, right? Obviously, as Nvidia keeps getting stronger and their competition remains unchecked, there's really no reason to go after, providing more of these raw performance benefits. And there's been a lot of talks about how serious some of these benchmarks have been done, how much Nvidia has improved. The reality of it is like most of the modern gaming like optimizations that are happening, most of the actual games that are being made, there's a lot of over reliance, at least in my personal opinion, on generating more frames or upscaling constantly. And I really feel like these technologies personally should exist in two cases, right? One, if you're really using something intense like path tracing, which games like Cyberpunk or Alan Wake 2 definitely do, and definitely do need upscaling and frame generating. Or in the other case, and I think this should be the case more pushed, is if you have an older Nvidia card or an older AMD card or an older card in general, to extend the life of these cards by maybe an extra year or two or maybe more, to use something like DLSS to basically run games at resolutions that would be comically insane, like natively, like 480p, and then pushing that up to something like 1080p, where it looks reasonably close to that native resolution, although somebody who has a much older card can absolutely achieve these benefits. A lot of these technologies do, thankfully, and at least Nvidia is pushing a lot of these stuff and backporting them to older generation cards, but generally speaking, I really feel like there's more of a, focus on how much AI can we stuff onto the card than actually trying to push for that real, raw, actual performance. And maybe it requires game developers to kind of scale back some development and think maybe we should focus on optimizing what we have rather than constantly pushing these newer technologies when we haven't really caught up in natively running them in the first place. Now, AMD as a company is probably, in my opinion, maybe the only real competitor. I know Intel exists as well too, but I don't know if Intel is entirely in the game as much as AMD really is. And even AMD is kind of questionable in that regard too. Nvidia's dominance is pretty much secured by the fact that they do genuinely make good hardware. I'm not going to take that away from them. But ultimately, as of like maybe the 40 series generation, they really haven't had serious competitors to their flagship. AMD, as of like literally now, I believe their most up-to-date actual processor is the 7900 XTX, right? Which is a pretty interesting, very decent card. And I believe its competitor might be maybe the 4080-ish, maybe 4070, something of that nature. I think the 4080. And the reality of it is they're still not competing with Nvidia on that generation-to-generation level. So recently there's been some talk about how the RX 9000 is supposed to be so aggressive in terms of its pricing. But the only way that I think this card is ever actually going to win, let alone this company, is if they seriously do think of undercutting their actual competition. I have no real dislike for AMD. In fact, I do genuinely believe that my next system will really be an AMD processor or GPU system, just for the fact that I am a Linux user and these guys do provide the better compatibility. But I like to have my cake and eat it too, and I really do hope that at least in some capacity, even if I know they won't be able to compete with that 5090, at least if you can put up a card that's as good as a 5080, at least in that raw performance, and then you can use things like FSR4 and frame generation to maybe kind of like clinch the lead with that 5090, as impossible as that may sound, just as copium filled as that may sound, is probably the best thing that they can do. Even if you were to pay like roughly the same prices as these as like an Nvidia card with like a slight undercut, I still think these guys could actually somewhat give some real competition. And that's the most important part about this. It's having that competition, right? Nvidia has only been allowed to rest on their laurels and succeed is because literally in their own space, they don't have to fight against the other graphic card manufacturer. In fact, for Nvidia, they don't even have to care about the gaming industry in general. For a lot of them, they're shifting towards artificial intelligences and massive AI data centers, which leaves at least AMD like the perfect market to jump back into. Look, if Nvidia is not going to give a shit about the actual gamer in terms of acquiring newer hardware, at least these guys need to come in and at least clinch that market share. Like, even as of now, the AMD stuff isn't exactly the best priced even. And again, this is like from Newegg, so obviously the prices have hopped up even beyond retail anyways. But as long as they can get some of these, not the flagship, but like just under the flagship, substantially undercutting the price of Nvidia, they might actually have a chance. And honestly speaking, switching to AMD, I'm absolutely expecting my experience to not be as efficient. Like, I'm probably going to lose a few frames per second on the video games. My ray tracing may not be there. And I guess the crux of all of this is, over the time spent researching this and really planning out my next build, a lot of it has just been me kind of telling myself that you're going to get a lesser experience, I guess, in terms of the software just by making a switch away from Nvidia. Now, yes, Nvidia is top dog for a reason. But again, as somebody that really believes in competition, I'm kind of hoping that AMD comes with some serious heat with this 9000 series, just in the sense that at least matching Nvidia's like maybe 5080, maybe the 5070 at the worst. I don't even expect AMD to take on the 5090. But if you're going to at least take on the 5080, that's still serious competition to be brought. And if you can price undercut the guys, then that's even better than nothing, right? Look, at the end, AMD has always been kind of the GPU underdog. Nvidia's always been sort of the person at the top. And maybe there was one period that I do remember, maybe with rose-tinted glasses, where both of these guys were really neck and neck. It was that 40 series of cards where, yeah, AMD really were substantially behind. And ultimately, if Nvidia is kind of resting on this AI stuff, it gives AMD hopefully that chance to come back. Again, most of this video was like really looking in, researching a lot of these technologies, and this is why it was kind of weird for me to make, because yeah, I don't want to support Nvidia, but being, truthful on my channel here, there is technology that they produce that is genuinely impressive for some gaming, especially for people who maybe buy lower end Nvidia cards and use things like DLSS to get that advantage, to get up there. But I see, like many gamers, that there's some serious excitement for AMD to come in and provide that actual competition, which is what I want to see, which is what I'm really excited for. And as somebody who's on Linux, they're definitely more respectful of my platform than Nvidia still is. So yeah, honestly, for where I want to take my PC gaming route, they're definitely the first choice to have. But I'm hoping that this choice keeps improving and AMD actually starts really challenging Nvidia. Because if they don't, Nvidia is still just going to rest on their entire laurels. And we're going to get less and less cool enhancements as each hardware generation passes. But ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to kind of end this video off because I wanted to just really get this rant out of the way, really discuss the future of, again, some of the builds that I'm doing. And, at some point you might get another dream PC build, you might get another PC build, you guys might get another Billy build at this point. And it might be purely Team Red, just because of the direction that Nvidia has taken and some of the direction that overall the gaming industry has taken anyways. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.